I thought we had a perfect marriage until I found the messages. She didn't even try to deny it. It was a Thursday, the kind of day that drags on forever, where exhaustion clings to you like a second skin. I had just wrapped up a brutal 12-hour shift, the kind that makes you question if work is slowly replacing your actual life. The only thing on my mind was getting home, taking a hot shower, and sinking into the couch with a cold beer. Everything seemed normal. No arguments the day before, no tension in the air, no lingering awkwardness that hinted at some underlying issue. Kelly and I had been in a good place, or at least that's what I thought. We weren't the type to fight over little things, and if something was wrong, she would have told me. Or so I believed. As I stepped inside, I tossed my keys onto the hallway table like I always did. The sound of metal hitting would echoed through the quiet space. The lights were on, casting a warm glow over the living room, and the TV was playing one of Kelly's favorite shows. Some crime drama she was obsessed with, but the volume was off. That was the first thing that felt off. Kelly never watched TV on mute. She liked the background noise, said it helped her unwind. Then I saw them. By the door, right next to the mat where we usually left our sneakers, were her new black heels. The ones she had splurged on 2 months ago. A $600 impulse buy that she had justified with a playful, "They make me feel powerful." Kelly wasn't the type to leave things lying around, especially not something she cared about. She was meticulous, borderline obsessive about order. Shoes went in the closet, not in the middle of the floor like an afterthought. I stared at them for a moment, a tiny flicker of unease settling in my stomach. Maybe she came home in a hurry and forgot to put them away. Maybe she was just tired. Logical explanations existed, and I didn't want to be the paranoid husband reading into every small detail. But then I noticed something else. Her purse, usually slung over the chair or neatly placed on the counter, was missing. The absence of it stood out more than if it had been in plain sight. I glanced around the room, scanning for any other details that didn't fit. The kitchen light was on, the scent of coffee lingering faintly in the air, but there was no cup in sight. I called out her name. "Kelly." Silence. The house wasn't big, so my voice should have carried easily. I stepped further inside, kicking off my boots and loosening my tie. Maybe she was in the bedroom, changing, or in the bathroom, drying her hair after a shower. But even as I moved through the space, something gnawed at me, a feeling I couldn't quite shake. I checked the kitchen first. A half-full bottle of wine sat on the counter, a single glass beside it. There was a faint smudge of lipstick on the rim, a deep red shade I recognized as one of her favorites. But the glass hadn't been fully emptied, and if there was one thing Kelly never did, it was waste wine. That's when I noticed the phone. It wasn't hers, it was an iPhone, but not the one I had seen her use every day. This one had a black case, a slight crack running through the screen. It sat face down on the counter, as if someone had set it there in a hurry. A chill ran through me. I turned it over. The screen lit up instantly, revealing a notification. A message from someone named Jay. "Miss you already. Tonight was perfect." My stomach dropped. Every logical explanation I had tried to hold onto disappeared in an instant. My hands tightened around the phone as my pulse pounded in my ears. There was no reason for this to be here. No reason for another man's message to be waiting on a phone that didn't belong to either of us. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my hands from shaking. I needed to be sure before I jumped to conclusions. Maybe it wasn't hers. Maybe it belonged to a friend who had left it behind. But deep down, I knew better. I wasn't ready for what I was about to find, but there was no turning back now. I stepped into the kitchen, half expecting to see Kelly standing there, sipping one of her overpriced coffees. The kind she swore was worth every penny because it tasted like luxury. She drank that stuff 10 times a day, always with that satisfied little sigh after the first sip. But the kitchen was empty. No coffee cup, no Kelly. Just silence. And her phone. It sat face down on the table, an island in the middle of an otherwise spotless space. That was strange. Kelly never left her phone unattended. Ever. It was practically glued to her hand, always within reach, whether she was texting, scrolling, or just holding it absent-mindedly. If she wasn't home, It should have been in her purse. But her purse wasn't here either. A dull weight settled in my chest as I reached for it. My fingers hovered over the smooth surface, my mind already at war with itself. I shouldn't. That was her personal space. But then again, so was our marriage, and suddenly, I wasn't so sure what that even meant anymore. I picked it up. The second my thumb brushed against the screen, it lit up, and a single unread message stared back at me. From Zach. I froze. Zach? Who the hell was Zach? My eyes flicked to the message preview beneath the name, and whatever flimsy rationalizations I had been trying to hold on to shattered in an instant. Yesterday was crazy. When will we meet again? A cold, sinking feeling gripped my stomach. Crazy. The word hit me like ice water down my spine. Not fun. Not exciting. Crazy. Like something reckless. Something passionate. Something that shouldn't have happened. My grip on the phone tightened. My pulse pounded in my ears. I replayed the last few weeks in my head, sifting through every conversation, every interaction, every seemingly normal moment between us. Had she mentioned a Zach? A coworker, maybe? A new client? Some old friend I had forgotten about? Nothing. Not once. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. Yesterday, she said she was working late. Something about an urgent project that had come up last minute. I didn't even think to question it. Why would I? I trusted her. Now, standing in our kitchen with her phone in my hand, my pulse hammering in my ears, I felt like an idiot. The message from Zach was still on the screen, taunting me. Yesterday was crazy. When will we meet again? Yesterday. The same night she said she was buried in work. A slow burn of anger crept through my veins, replacing the initial shock with something hotter, sharper. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen, my mind flipping between two options. I could put the phone down, pretend I never saw the message, and wait for her to explain herself, assuming she ever did. Or I could find out the truth myself. I made my choice. With a deep breath, I swiped up, and the lock screen disappeared. Her password hadn't changed. The irony wasn't lost on me. She still used the same 6 digits, the ones tied to our anniversary. Like some kind of sick joke. I went straight to her messages, scrolling until I found the full conversation with Zach. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just one message. It was an entire thread. A long, ongoing thread. Flirtations. Inside jokes. Plans to meet up. Photos. God, the photos. I could barely breathe as I scrolled. Some were innocent at first, her smiling at a restaurant, a dimly lit bar in the background. Then there were others, ones I wished I had never seen. Her in a hotel room mirror, wearing a dress I'd never seen before, lips painted in that deep red shade she only wore for special occasions. A photo of her legs crossed over a man's lap, his hand resting on her thigh. I felt like I was going to be sick, the nausea twisted in my gut, thick and suffocating. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't some harmless chat with an old friend. This was a lie that had just exposed itself in the ugliest way possible. The door creaked softly behind me. For a split second, I couldn't move. My body was frozen, my mind still drowning in the images I had just seen. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Then, slowly, I turned around. There she was. Kelly stood in the doorway wearing one of my t-shirts, the same one she always stole after a shower, claiming it was softer than hers. Her damp hair clung to her shoulders, still dripping slightly onto the fabric. She looked relaxed, smiling at me like nothing was wrong, like nothing had happened. "Oh, are you home yet?" she asked, her voice light, casual. I just stared at her, my fingers curled tighter around the phone. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, a slow, unbearable burn. My throat felt tight, like I couldn't even swallow. How could she stand there, looking so normal, when I had proof of everything sitting in the palm of my hand? I didn't say a word. I just lifted the phone, turned the screen toward her, and let the damning messages speak for themselves. Her smile disappeared instantly. Her face went pale, the blood draining from her cheeks so fast I thought she might faint. Her lips parted slightly, like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. For the first time, Kelly looked afraid. It's not what you think. Her voice was soft, almost pleading, but there was a shake to it, like she was testing the waters, trying to figure out just how much I knew before committing to a full lie. She took a step closer, her bare feet patting against the kitchen tiles, and reached for the phone in my hand. Instinctively, I pulled it back, holding it out of her reach. That slight movement alone was enough to make her flinch. Not what I think, I repeated, my voice steady but sharp. Okay, then explain. Yesterday was crazy. What does that mean, Kelly? Her lips parted, but no words came out right away. I could see it. The panic, the gears turning in her head, searching for an answer that wouldn't make things worse. But there was no good answer. She knew that. I knew that. Still, she tried. Zach is just a friend, she said quickly, too quickly. We were at a corporate party, and, well, we had a little too much to drink. She forced out a nervous laugh, as if trying to downplay the entire thing, like she thought I'd believe it if she acted casual enough. But I wasn't buying it. A bitter chuckle escaped my lips. Flat, hollow, completely void of humor. It wasn't even a choice. It just came out, the sheer audacity of her words pulling it from somewhere deep inside me. A friend, I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper, but sharp enough to cut through the air between us. I turned the phone screen toward her again, my grip tightening as I scrolled through the messages. You send photos like this to your friends, Kelly? Her entire body stiffened. The slight tremble in her hands stopped. The guilt that had flickered in her eyes a moment ago, gone. Instead, I watched something else take its place, something colder, sharper. She straightened her back and crossed her arms, her expression hardening. Annoyance. That was the moment I knew. Not just that she had betrayed me, not just that she had lied, but that she didn't even feel bad about it. This wasn't remorse. This wasn't guilt. This was irritation. She was annoyed at me, like I was the one making a big deal out of nothing, like I was overreacting. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Are you serious right now? I asked, my voice low, dangerous. She rolled her eyes, a forced breath pushing past her lips as she shifted her weight from one foot to the other. God, Nate, do you even hear yourself? You're acting like I murdered someone. She gestured toward the phone, dismissing it like it was me being ridiculous and not the evidence of her betrayal sitting in my hands. I told you it was just a party. Things got a little out of hand, but it's not like it means anything. That was it. That was the moment the anger that had been simmering inside me finally boiled over. Not like it means anything? I repeated, my voice rising now, the sheer absurdity of her words making my blood burn under my skin. You expect me to believe that after seeing all of this? After reading what he sent you? After seeing what you sent back? Her expression didn't waver. She didn't shrink under the weight of my words, didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. Instead, she let out a sharp breath and shook her head, as if I was the exhausting one in this conversation. Oh my God, Nate, you are so dramatic. Dramatic. That word hit me harder than the messages, harder than the photos. Dramatic, like I was just imagining things, like I was some jealous, controlling husband who couldn't handle the fact that his wife had a life outside of him. I took a step closer, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. Tell me something, Kelly, I said, my voice calm again, but not in a way that meant I was cooling down. It was the kind of calm that came just before a storm. If I had gone out last night, gotten drunk, and sent photos like this to another woman, if I had let her touch me, let her sit in my lap, let her whisper in my ear, would it still be not a big deal to you? For the first time, something flickered across her face. Not guilt, not regret, frustration, like she hated that I was making this inconvenient for her. That's different, she muttered. I laughed again, but this time it was colder. Different. She waved her hands in the air, exasperated now. You don't understand, okay? It's not like I planned for this to happen. We were drinking, we were all letting loose after a stressful week, and Zach, he was just there. It wasn't some big, planned-out thing, right? I nodded slowly. It just happened. She blinked. Yes. I studied her for a long moment. The woman standing in front of me now completely unrecognizable from the one I had loved, trusted, built my life with. So tell me, I said finally, when exactly did you start deleting your texts? Her eyes snapped up to mine, her lips parting slightly. She hesitated just for a second. But that was all I needed. I knew. I had caught her. She could have denied everything, could have kept up the act. But that pause, that single, fleeting moment of hesitation before she forced her expression back into indifference, that was the truth. That was the crack in her carefully crafted lie. That's what I thought, I muttered. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and now she was really on the defensive. Jesus, Nate, you're acting like I cheated on you or something. I turned the phone around and tapped the screen, scrolling through the messages again until I landed on the worst of them. A photo of her, sprawled across a hotel bed in nothing but an oversized button-up shirt. His shirt, her lips slightly parted, her hair a mess, her expression intimate. I held it up between us. Tell me, Kelly, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Do you do this with all your friends? Her face paled again, but she recovered quickly, her arms folding tighter across her chest. This is so typical, she muttered. You never listen to me. You just assume the worst and jump straight to accusations. Maybe if you actually paid attention to me once in a while, instead of being so caught up in work, I wouldn't have needed to. I slammed the phone down on the counter so hard she jumped. Needed to what, Kelly? I snapped. Needed to what? She swallowed hard, her lips pressing together, her fingers gripping the hem of my t-shirt like she was trying to ground herself. She didn't answer, because we both knew whatever excuse she had wasn't good enough. Why are you even going through my phone? That's not normal. Her voice was sharp now, rising with each word. Not pleading, not remorseful, angry, like I was the one in the wrong, like I had somehow betrayed her. I almost laughed. Almost. Kelly's arms were still crossed, her posture shifting from defensive to outright hostile. Her face, which had been pale moments ago, was now flushed with irritation. I could see it in her eyes, the way they darted around, looking for an escape route. She wasn't trying to fix this. She was trying to win. You're paranoid, Tom, she snapped. You're controlling me. Ah, there it was. The classic move. The reversal. She wasn't defending what she had done, because how could she? There was no defense. Instead, she was flipping the entire thing back on me. I had caught her lying. I had caught her sneaking around with another man. I had caught her sending those messages, those pictures. But somehow, in her mind, I was supposed to be the guilty one. I was supposed to be the bad guy for finding out. I clenched my jaw, inhaling deeply through my nose, forcing myself to stay calm. Not because I didn't want to yell. Not because I wasn't furious. But because I had already won. And the fact that she was scrambling, resorting to this, it meant she knew it too. You're really going to try this? I asked, my voice dangerously low. After everything I just saw? She scoffed, shaking her head. I can't believe you don't see how insane this is. Normal people don't go snooping through their spouse's phone. Normal people trust each other. He stared at her. Really stared at her. This woman, the one I had spent years loving, building a life with, was gaslighting me. She wasn't crying. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't begging for forgiveness like a person who had just been caught cheating. No, she was furious. Furious that I had found out. Furious that I knew. Trust. I repeated slowly, tasting the word like poison on my tongue. I leaned forward, my hands bracing against the counter between us. You want to talk about trust, Kelly? Because I trusted you when you said you were working late. I trusted you when you said you were exhausted after such a long day at the office. I trusted you while you were out sneaking around, sending... I gestured toward the phone, my voice breaking for the first time. That. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She was seething, not ashamed, not even embarrassed, just angry that I wasn't falling for her game. You don't get it? She said, her voice still sharp but quieter now, as if she was trying to rein herself in. "Oh, I get it," I shot back. "I get it perfectly. The moment I caught you, you didn't feel bad. You didn't say you were sorry. You didn't even try to lie your way out of it. The first thing you did was try to flip this on me." She let out a sharp breath, shaking her head. "I can't talk to you when you're like this." "When I'm like this?" I laughed, but it was dry and bitter. "When I'm pissed off because my wife has been sneaking around behind my back. Yeah. Forgive me if I'm not my usual self, Kelly." She threw up her hands. "I can't win with you, can I? No matter what I say, you're just going to believe whatever narrative you want." Narrative. Like I had made this up. Like this wasn't her fault. "You're unbelievable," I muttered, shaking my head. Kelly took a deep breath, as if she were trying to compose herself. Then she softened her expression just slightly, like she thought she could still steer this in her favor. "Tom," she started, her voice slower now, controlled, calculated. "I didn't mean to hurt you, okay? But you're being so aggressive about this. Can't we just take a step back? Can't we just talk about this like adults?" I stared at her in disbelief. "Talk about this?" I repeated, as if this was just some minor disagreement. As if I had walked in on her watching a show without me, not caught her having an affair. I let out a slow breath, steadying myself. I wouldn't let her manipulate me. Not this time. "You don't get to decide how I react to this, Kelly," I said, my voice cold now. "You don't get to sit there and act like I'm overreacting when I caught you cheating. You don't get to play the victim when you're the one who ruined this." Her jaw clenched, but she said nothing. "No more excuses," I continued. "No more deflecting. You want to talk about this like adults? Fine. Then tell me the truth." She hesitated. A beat of silence. A single second where I thought maybe she'd finally come clean. But then, "You know what? Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with work, I wouldn't have felt so alone." My stomach turned. There it was. The real excuse. The real reason she thought she could justify this. "Alone," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "That's your excuse?" She shrugged, her arms still crossed, her nails digging into her skin. "What did you expect, Tom? You work late. You barely pay attention to me. I needed something. And Zach was just there." I blinked. She said it so casually, like she had just bought a new dress behind my back. "Not destroyed our marriage." I took a step back, swallowing hard. "You have no idea what you just did, do you?" I muttered. Her eyes flickered. Uncertainty. Good. She was finally catching up to what was about to happen. I nodded slowly, shoving the phone into my pocket. "You're right about one thing," I said, keeping my voice calm, even though my chest was burning. "We should talk about this like adults." She exhaled slightly, like she thought she had won something. But she hadn't, because the next words out of my mouth shattered that illusion completely. "I want a divorce." And just like that, her entire face dropped. I threw the phone back into her hands. "If you didn't do anything wrong, then explain this," I said, my voice steady, ice cold. She barely caught the phone before it slipped from her fingers, her breath hitching as I reached over and scrolled the chat further up, showing her even more. More messages. More photos. Her smile in a dimly lit hotel room mirror. The curve of her body half hidden beneath a man's arm. A shot of her hand resting on his chest, on Zach's chest. Her face changed instantly. For the first time, the mask cracked. I saw the truth flicker across her expression before she forced it down, scrambling to put her walls back up. She licked her lips, sucked in a sharp breath, and tried again. "Tom, you're just..." she started, shaking her head, her voice suddenly trembling, but not in a way that meant she felt bad. Not guilt, fear, not of losing me, but of losing control over the situation. "You're just too jealous. I have a right to friends." I exhaled slowly, staring at her. This woman I had spent years with, this woman I had built a life around, this woman I had trusted without question, and I felt absolutely nothing for her in that moment. Not love, not anger, not even hatred, just emptiness. I couldn't listen to it anymore. Without another word, I turned away, my body moving on its own. I walked out of the kitchen, past the living room, straight to the bedroom and yanked open the closet. My duffel bag sat on the top shelf, exactly where I had left it months ago after our last weekend trip together. Felt like a lifetime ago now. I pulled it down, unzipped it and started throwing things in there. Jeans, shirts, socks. Enough to last me a few days. Kelly's voice followed me before she did. "What are you doing?" she asked, still in the kitchen, still trying to decide if she should fight or beg. I didn't answer. I kept packing. She must have realized I wasn't bluffing, because seconds later, she was in the doorway. Now she looked panicked. "Tom," she said again, softer this time. She took a hesitant step forward, like she wasn't sure if she should reach for me or not. "Come on, let's just talk. We don't have to do this. You're upset. I get it. But..." I zipped up the duffel bag in one sharp motion. I turned to face her. "No, Kelly," I said, my voice calm. "We do have to do this. Are you really going to leave because of this?" Her voice was sharp, desperate, borderline hysterical now. Gone was the smugness, the defiance, the indifference she had thrown at me just minutes ago. Now she looked scared. Scared because she realized she had lost. I didn't stop. I zipped up my duffel bag, slung it over my shoulder, and took one last look at her. This woman who had been my wife. This woman I had trusted. This woman who had betrayed me and then had the audacity to make me feel like I was the problem. I met her eyes, and for the first time I felt nothing. No pain, no regret, just clarity. "I'm done," I said simply. Then one final word. "Enough." I turned away. She screamed after me. Her voice followed me through the hallway, down the stairs, out the front door. "Tom, stop. Don't do this. You're throwing everything away." But I didn't listen. I stepped out into the night, the cold air hitting my skin like a reset, like a fresh start. And as I walked away, I realized she wasn't upset because she had lost me. She was upset because she had lost control. And that was no longer my problem. I stepped outside, the door slamming shut behind me with a force that felt final. It wasn't just a door closing. It was an entire chapter of my life ending. I barely looked back. My hands clenched around the strap of my duffel bag as I made my way to the car, my breath slow and controlled, the anger burning out and leaving something else in its place. Emptiness. I yanked open the back door and tossed my bag onto the seat, my movements stiff, mechanical. The cold wind bit at my skin, but I barely felt it. My mind was too full, too loud, too done. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just drove, past the familiar streets, past the town I had called home for years, past every memory I had built with a woman who had been lying to my face. The farther I got, the lighter I felt, like I was shedding something heavy, something that had been crushing me for far too long. A few hours passed before I finally pulled into a rundown motel 60 miles out of town. The neon sign flickered weakly in the dark, buzzing like an afterthought. It was the kind of place you stopped at when you had nowhere else to go, when you needed distance more than comfort. I checked in without thinking, paid in cash, and let the door creak shut behind me as I dropped onto the stiff mattress. For the first time that night, I let out a breath, and I slept. The next morning, I woke up feeling strange, not broken, not shattered, just different, like something had shifted inside me. I had left too much behind to just disappear completely, so I drove back. Not to talk, not to fight, just to get the rest of my things. When I walked inside, the house was eerily silent. Kelly was gone. No screaming, no last-minute arguments, no forced apologies or grand gestures. She had left first. The living room looked untouched, the kitchen still carrying the faintest scent of the coffee she had made yesterday. But when I stepped into our bedroom, that's when I saw it. A single, crumpled piece of paper on my side of the bed. I knew exactly what it was before I even picked it up. My note, the one I had written yesterday before I walked out the door. Just a friendly get-together, right? But now, beneath my handwriting, there was something else. A single word. Goodbye. That was it. No explanations. No justifications. She didn't even try. She just walked away. And that told me everything I needed to know. I stood there for a while, staring at the note in my hands, waiting to feel something. Anything. Pain, anger, regret. But there was nothing. Just a strange, quiet relief. Because in that moment, it finally hit me. She hadn't just left now. She had been gone for a long time, absent from our marriage, absent from us. And I had spent so much time trying to hold on, trying to believe in something that had stopped existing long before I even realized it. I placed the note back on the bed, grabbed my last bag, and left. I didn't look back. I didn't need to.